management agency, which is myself and the other staff developing and executing the program. We have what's known as the emergency management team, which is not just our leadership and staff, but also our partners, our ComEds, our North Shore Gas, different groups in the community working together. And we involve them with planning, training, exercising, information sharing, operations, et cetera. And then we have what's known as the Lake County Emergency Operations Center, which is actually where our leadership and staff are assigned to coordinate that support during an emergency. We have multiple locations throughout Lake County. So we have offices and storage locations in Libertyville. We have our seats at the county administrator's office at 18 North County in Waukegan. And then even myself in non-pandemic times, I'm actually housed out of the health department's building at 3010 Grand Avenue. I haven't been there in a year because of the pandemic. I've been at the Emergency Operations Center, but essentially we work together to consolidate and integrate some of our programs and some of our physical locations as well. When I talk about responsibility for us, this graphic here on your right, the blue is the municipal areas of Lake County, and the green is the unincorporated areas. So typically in the unincorporated areas, we're the lead and our municipalities would support and our partners. In the other areas, the municipality leads and we support. When you look at the actual graph, that's the municipalities make up 89% of the people and 65% of the land. So a lot of your municipalities are leading efforts, but we're supporting them when they need resources or assistance. That isn't all inclusive. We don't have a county fire department. There's fire protection districts, so that's a little bit different than this graph. And then from the public health side of things during a pandemic, as you all have kind of known, the health department is the lead in that effort, which is our partnership. So in the pandemic, we're responsible for all of Lake County. Some of the other things, really kind of trying to highlight in an elevator speech of what we do. A lot of it is emergency operations planning and response. So we do have a robust emergency operations plan. We also, all our municipalities are required to have plans. We review those plans using a standardized tool. We update those and we try to make sure that they're more resilient before an emergency happens. We also coordinate emergency operations here that we're responsible for and supporting municipalities. Resource management logistics is a big one. When I showed the slide with the flood responses, you saw lots of sandbags. This right here, these pictures are PPE. So for us in our program, for example, we've distributed 3.2 million items of personal protective equipment. So to comment early, Jerry, that not many people know about us. In the last year, a lot of people know about us now because we've distributed 3 million items of PPE. So, but they didn't before. So, making sure we keep people kind of safe. That's a big part of what we do. In a flood, it might be pumps. Like the event of a train derailment, or if a municipality was responding or a fire department, we would support them with whatever they need. So resources and equipment. And if we can't meet that need, we would work with the state and we would continue up the chain until we get that support. We do a lot of work with training and exercising, so training people in advance and testing those things before an incident. When we actually have an actual, like the anhydrous ammonia outbreak in Beach Park or the Waukegan explosion, we debrief, we say, what did we learn from an actual event? And then we update our plan. So it's an approach that we kind of take to learn from each incident. And we do the same with exercises. We have an exercise, we test components of a plan. We say, hey, this works, this doesn't work. We adapt it and we keep evolving. Continuity planning is a huge piece for us. We're living it right now in this event with COVID-19 of like, how do we keep businesses open and activities going? Right now, as we go to June 11th with the phase 5, it's a lot of conversations with us of, how do we maintain the courts and how do we keep safe operations? So we do a lot of work with that in our group with continuity planning and looking at mission essential functions. Threat and hazard analysis is a big one for us, knowing what the threats are in Lake County. So we do a robust assessment. Learning from you all and being part of this group is another piece of that, of learning of the threats in the community. Public education outreach, it could be like the presentation today, or we'll go talk to the Boy Scouts. We do a National Weather Service event, a big weather spotter training with a couple hundred people normally each year, just ways to get education on emergency management. We do, one of the things we do specifically, we assist with public assistance. So if we had a big event in Lake County that met certain damage thresholds, we could get federal assistance. So we assist with that. And a big piece of that is what's known as damage assessments. We have an electronic damage assessment tool. We work with our partners to assess damages in the community, and we try to get assistance for the community. Emergency communications is another one in case communication systems go down. We have different types of communication methods, and really volunteer management is a big piece. So as I mentioned, we're a small group, but we rely on a really great group of volunteers. So I'll talk a little bit about our Emergency Operations Center and what it does. So the purpose of an Emergency Operations Center, it's really coordinating information and making key decisions on operations. Really acquiring, allocating, and tracking resources for an identified need is a big piece of what we do. Managing and sharing information, establishing the response priorities among an incident. We could provide legal and financial support if needed. An example with COVID would be quarantine orders for our partners. And then we are a liaison with other jurisdictions and level of government. And really an effective EOC helps to establish what's known as a common operating picture. So if we have an incident or incidents in Lake County, collecting, consolidating, and showing a good picture of what's happening. An EOC for us in Lake County EMA and what we do, it's really long-term planning. There's often incidents that happen in Lake County that are handled by a local municipality or response agency that we find out about after the fact. For us to activate an emergency operations center, that's a resource allocation kind of operation, and oftentimes that's long-term. So we don't necessarily activate an EOC every time an incident happens in Lake County, but if we are requested for assistance or there's a potential need, we will activate an EOC. It improves continuity, provides ready access to available information, simplifies that information analysis. During an event, there's a lot of information flowing, so we try to collect, consolidate, and analyze it. So for example, every Monday, we take all the information from the previous week, we take the current positivity rates, we take all the things going on, and we present that back to our leadership, all our department heads and elected officials every Monday to share information and put it in a neat kind of tight knit bow to analyze and get a current state of what's going on. And then really resource identification and assignment is a big piece of that. So the difference between what we do in EMA versus incident command. So incident command is your on the scene action. So in the event of like a hazmat type incident, Dan Eder is not going out there and in a suit and doing operations. That's not really what we do. We're the emergency management coordination that happens at the Emergency Operations Center. So really we are supporting that incident commander. That incident commander is going to be on scene. They're going to develop and execute what's known as an incident action plan, so that the details of what has to happen. And then they're going to request any resource and support needs through the Emergency Operations Center. And then really for us, we're supporting that incident commander. We're coordinating with the state emergency operations center, so we make sure we're no different than a local would keep us informed. We're going to keep the state informed. We're going to coordinate delivery of county support, and that could be through the emergency operations center. That could also be department operations centers, and what those are, for example, is Lake County Passage, who monitors our traffic. They are known as department operations center, so we might coordinate direct support through them, for example, rather than not just the EOC. We would request mutual aid, and then really that providing situational awareness to stakeholders up, down, laterally. This is just a quick graphic of what I just mentioned here. So in this case, this is what we call a minor incident. So a type 4, your red's your incident. You have your incident commander here. They might be requesting mutual aid through other groups in Lake County. Let's say this is an incident with the fire department and they use MABUS, which is their mutual aid, or they might be looking at outside Lake County. They might as well have a municipal emergency operations center. So in the case of when Beach Park had the anhydrous ammonia release, which is the incident, they had an incident commander on scene. Beach Park had their municipal EOC open, and they were coordinating resource needs and information needs to our emergency operations center. And then we were actually working with our department operations center. So example, the sheriff's office with their department operations center to make sure we're providing direct support. So that's just an example of a type 4 incident. This is a type 1 incident. So there's a much more complex slide that I didn't want to show because it's a little overwhelming, but this is an example of what a complex incident looks like. You have an incident spanning across your municipalities and Lake County jurisdiction, multiple incidents going on at once, what's known as unified area command, because there's multiple incidents, trying to have a unified command structure, multiple EOCs, multiple policies. Our group is to collect, consolidate, pull that all together, and make sure we can provide support, and then we can also coordinate with the state and the feds. So a lot of our effort is, again, that resource and information coordination. This is what the organizational chart looks like in the EOC. So we have a policy group, which is our leadership up top here, providing overall support and leadership direction of what's important for us. We have the command and staff, so myself as who might be an EOC director or manager running the operations. And then we have these different groups, functional groups within our EOC. And so you have an assessment group assessing the needs in the community, assessing the climate and environment. You have operations on the scene or providing support. You have the resources, identifying resource needs, and then we just have our general support staff. So I didn't want to make everyone sick and move my camera, but I am in the Emergency Operations Center right now, and it is empty. It has been empty for an entire year. It has been in a typical activation, which we are still active. This room is full. So we've had to have some unique challenges during this pandemic, but essentially these people, our positions are multiple people deep. They're trained regularly. They have access to tools and a software that we use to manage the emergency, and we can coordinate efforts through that. So as we are a group of 3 in our program, we are not doing this alone. And then really how we might activate is we're going to get notified from some type of source. An incident's going to happen. We're going to start to see water levels rise, and we're talking with the municipality and they're starting to see flooding. It could be an explosion or something else. We're going to get some type of notification. We're going to quickly advise our leadership. We used to use a text group. We may actually change that to Microsoft Teams, one of the lessons that we learned, but we're going to have a quick conversation and a call for activation. If we activate this EOC, we are going to notify the entire emergency management team. So not only our staff leadership, but also our partners that we're activating and why we're activating. So they're getting up-to-date information. We're going to activate our software in the tool known as VOC, which actually provides dashboards, provides where we can request resources and information. It tracks it all, it consolidates it all. It's that pulling that information together towards that common operating picture. And then we're going to activate, and we're going to manage the response in VOC through our StarCom radios, through our operations, whatever we need to do. And then I just took a screenshot of this, but we have what's known as an activation matrix. So there's going to be things that require us to activate. There could be specific parameters. It's not a requirement, it's a guideline, but it gives us a baseline and a threshold when we activate. This is just the first 3. There's specific ones on hazardous materials. And I will say that if a municipality requests assistance, we will activate immediately. That's one of our trigger points. So whenever there's a perceived or identified need, we're going to proactively activate. So that's just a quick wave top of at least what we do to kind of give you guys a little bit of background. So I'm going to go through a little bit about what the State Emergency Planning Committee does, the Lake County Emergency Planning Committee, and some reporting requirements. I will say I probably don't have every piece of information you're looking for, but I did try to provide a lot of links. And if there's information that you need or want, I can consolidate that, take that and bring that back to the LEPC. So, and I'm going to do a little bit of slide reading here, but really the State Emergency Response Commission, that's their goal is really to promote that chemical emergency preparedness through the state of Illinois. And they're also known as the CERC. So the CERC, through the implementation of planning and community right to know laws, and through the establishment and support of the LEPCs, they'll assist in chemical emergency planning, providing public access to chemical data, raise public awareness of chemical risks, and encourage public participation. I put a link here to make it easy where the CERC is, or where to find some of their information. And some of the stuff they do have is they do have specific reporting requirements for hazardous materials releases. So if there's a hazardous materials release, there are specific reporting requirements that have to be done. And this is a quick link to that. They do have to post public records of their hazardous materials reports. So if someone does report to the state, we do get a copy in EMA, but as well, it's also public record. It says FOIA hazmat search. You can actually search it right now. And then really any owner operator facilities that have hazardous chemicals on hand in quantities equal or greater than set threshold levels, they must submit what's known as a tier 2 report or form. And those hard copies, we do is the LEPCs will send out notifications and make sure they comply, but they are required, besides submitting those to the CERC, they have to submit hard copies to the LEPCs and then also to the local fire department.
And is that only facilities, or would that include like train and truck freight?
I think a lot of it is through facilities, but I'll talk a little bit about some of the information on trains, because it kind of goes right in here. So the other thing here is the US DOT, the order requiring crude oil rail shipment notifications to CERC. So, I kind of put a lot of text here, but really, information from those railroad accidents and investigations, they really found some potential for unsafe conditions or unsafe practices, specifically a pattern of release and fires involving petroleum crude oil shipments. That's straight from the code right there. Essentially, they have to provide notification, which I'll show in the next slide. And if they don't, they could be prohibited from transporting. It's 1 million gallons, but essentially from transporting. And those requirements that they have to do are right here. And those requirements that they must provide is a estimate of the number of trains that are expected to travel per week through each county within the state. So they must provide a report each week for each county. So the reports typically have all the counties. It's not specific to Lake. What the petroleum crude oil expected to be transported, the response information. So a lot of times the emergency response guides, they'll pull the actual pages for each one of those and have them attached so it's easy access. And then they do have to identify the routes which material will be transported. It's got to have a point of contact for the railroad, responsible for this reporting contact for the CERC, and relevant responder information. So they actually submit that information to the state emergency response coordinator or to the committee, and then we get kind of a version of a report with that information. Obviously, I say obviously, but the Secretary of Transportation has the authority to regulate that transportation of petroleum crude oil. This is the link for the Federal Railroad Administration. It does have some good information on there when I looked at it, but I know one of the questions I think that Jerry, you asked me, and for us, we have a different view, but is all of this information easily accessible online? And I can tell you, for me, it wasn't like it took me I could not find it easily. So if it's out there and it's online, it is not easily available. And this is something we did reach out to the state emergency or to the CERC to say, is this information posted? Is it easily available? Can we make it accessible so our communities can kind of see what's out there and traveling through the community? So I know that's a big topic for this group, and that's a follow-up for us to see if it's easily available. I did post this here because if it's not easily available today or easy to find, this is the direct link to ask for that information through the state. So I tried to pull in links to make it as easy as possible, but that's something for us that we see a different view. We do get a report, but we're not, from the public side, I'm like, well, let me go look and see if I can find it. And it wasn't like it was easily accessible. It didn't take me 5 minutes to find it. So that's a little bit about the CERC. I'm just giving you kind of the wave tops here, but as far as what does the Lake County Emergency Planning Committee do? The LC, we actually go by the LCEPC. It's the Lake County Emergency Planning Committee. So we got to be a little different versus the LEPC, but just try to make it not confusing. Really, the mission of that committee is really to promote the safety in the community by promoting hazardous materials awareness, supporting planning efforts, encouraging cooperative partnerships between communities and industry, and developing and sponsoring educational and training programs relative to hazardous materials in Lake County. So serving as a liaison between hazardous materials operators, response agencies, and the community. Really, one of the other things is the committee is responsible for an emergency response plan that goes to the State Emergency Response Commission, so the CERC, and it's really to the goal or the requirement for that plan is to prepare emergency response agencies for the demand which a hazardous material incident places on them. So our requirement is, and that plan is kind of like, what is the, how do we make sure we make things easy if an incident were to happen? And I'll talk about what's in that plan in a few other slides. And I did mention here the LEPC is a 501c3. So Dan Eder, as part of EMA, is a member of that group. It's not necessarily EMA's group. We are members of it, but it is a separate entity. It has partnerships between response agencies and business entities that store and maintain hazardous chemicals. And but we do house them here at our office for meetings. We let them use our meeting space. There is a board, there is a website, and that I'll provide that in the slides.
And can you clarify what a 503c3 is?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a typo. It's 501c3. So a non-for-profit. Yeah. Sorry about that.
And what is a 501c3?
Like a non-for-profit type of entity. Yeah. At one point they were, I believe, under the Lake County EMA a long time ago, but it made sense because it was a coalition of businesses. It wasn't really an EMA function. It's this coalition of everyone working together and being that liaison that it made sense to build it into its own separate group. But before my time. The other thing with the plan itself, the LEPC Chemical Emergency Response Plan, is MABUS, the Mutual Aid Box Alarm System, which is that mutual aid between fire departments. They also have standard operating guidelines. So they're the group that's going to be involved with that incident response. I mean, they're going to be the ones that are, planning and responding to the incident. So, if they haven't presented or been part of this conversation, I would definitely advise, trying to invite them, or we can ask on your behalf, because they're going to have a perception of how they work with the community and what they do that maybe the LEPC won't have, because they have different pieces of that, but we work together. And the one thing I will say, and I mentioned here, is that in the event that their guidelines and our guidelines, maybe there's a conflict, their guidelines do supersede us, because they're really looking at public safety, and safety is going to come first. I don't think it's ever going to happen, but it is part of the plan itself. And then really for us, for EMA, we have the All Hazards Emergency Operations Plan, so our EOP. And we've kind of taken their chemical emergency response plan, and that's kind of a functional annex to our EOP. So it doesn't make sense to have a completely separate annex and not standardize that. So we kind of take their plan and we integrate it as a functional annex to our EOP. So what does the plan itself have? So it has requirements for hazardous materials operators. So what is the requirement to be an operator, and what are the things you have to do? So if you're not an operator, we make that easy to tell you what you need to do. Or if you're not familiar, roles and responsibilities are pretty big. So your local fire department, I put some notes in parentheses just to kind of explain what their roles are. They're really your first responder on the scene most of the time. Your incident commander is that person that's in charge on the scene. That's still maybe the local fire department, but that is specified of roles and responsibilities for both. That MABUS Division 4 and 5 hazardous materials team, they're really the ones responsible for the response, the control, the coordination. The LEPC is really kind of just that training and reporting piece. The LCEMA, which is myself, we're really that EOC coordination support. So if an incident happened, what needs do we have? There's even, identified roles for elected officials, what they should do. And then there's a whole lot of other groups, especially the regulatory and recovery side, that have an active involvement. So in this particular topic, the Department of Transportation has a very significant role in it. IEMA has a role in it. IEPA has a very active role, especially with the hazardous material release, and depending on where it gets to. Our state's attorney may have a role. I mean, even the health department has a lot of roles if well and septic and other things are involved. So in the event of a hazardous material release, there's a lot of partners involved, and we've tried to outline, what is your role in this response. We also talk about different incident levels. So what's, like we have activation levels in the graphic I showed you, there's also incident levels. What are recommendations for public notification? What are particular countermeasures and shelter in place and different things you can do? What are restoration potential, strategies? We have some information on additional reporting requirements. So certain releases at quantities have to also be reported by the National Response Center. So I did include that link as well. So there's a database of records on there that's searchable for different spills and activities that have happened. We have a whole list of emergency phone numbers, so it makes it easy to find the contact that you need when you need it, because you don't want to be fumbling for that information during an emergency. We actually have an emergency response contractor list. So if it's cleanup or mitigation activities, an approved list. And then if you were out in the field and you had to report something, we have a template of what a log would look like. So we tried to kind of make that kind of cradle to grave plan, but it's specifically on the response efforts. And so what are the goals for the LEPC at this time? The big one for the group and the requirement is really the submission of those tier 2 reports. That's a big piece of what the LEPC does. We have a lot of hazardous chemicals in Lake County. It needs to be transparent, it needs to be record, and it needs to be in those tier 2 reports to be in compliance. Continued education and outreach. So not only talking to you folks today and learning a little bit more about, what knowledge you have, getting out in the community as much as possible. A lot of it with the LEPC, to be very transparent, is increased partnerships are something we're definitely looking forward to, and really increased membership in the committee, and especially those local businesses involved with hazardous materials. I mean, they bring another aspect that we don't see as an operator, and we have a lot of good ones in the group, but we've really been extensively trying to push to get more active membership, and especially from the groups in the field dealing with hazardous chemicals. Improve planning and plans based on known threats. So just threats that we know, and threats like the conversation today, where we're learning, even for us in EMA, about potential threats in the community and how we can plan better. And then we do, the pandemic aside, because we didn't do it the last year, but training is a big piece. And the LEPC does a yearly educational symposium, if anyone's not aware. And I did put like a 2014, I did put an old agenda, just because crude oil transportation, for example, was one of the things that was listed. But typically there is yearly training for the public, for responders, for people in the community, or I'm sorry, operators and others, to get specific training on their specific yearly training that we're required to do. And then we pick a wide variety of topics. This one has the crude oil training, but normally they're typically a lot of hazard specific training. So typically from the National Response Center, for example, the last, I think, 3 years we've done hazardous materials incidents, the impacts, and what could have been done differently. So, talking and listening to all you folks today, this might be a great potential topic for the next symposium, if we, bring someone in from the CERC or from some other group to really talk and educate about some of the impacts. So part of the agenda is built on conversations like we have today. So I tried to go fast in an effort for time. I'm sure I probably didn't hit every kind of topic you guys are interested in, but I will say I did talk to the LEPC, to their president, before this, and I said, if you guys do have specific questions, the LCEMA email on here, we will consolidate those. We can bring those back to the LEPC, whatever questions you have. If we can't get the answers locally, we'll work with the state and others to try to get you those answers, and then we can share that back with the group. I mean, I think our goal is to try to help provide whatever we can, even if it's information or direction. The LEPC does have a website here. It is under construction, but there's still information on there if you want to take a look, like where our meetings are hosted. And then my information's below. So if you just have a general question about what I talked about today, or you just need information, I'm always willing to take a phone call or email. So I think that is it for me.
I see one question in the chat. There was a question about set threshold levels. What are the set threshold levels that you had mentioned?
So it depends on this. It depends on the mode of transportation and the substance itself. So there's not going to be like a set threshold for one type of substance or material. So there, depending on, like, the National Response Center has specific threshold levels for whatever the material is. And we can provide easy links to that as well. Some of the links that I provided have a whole list of items like that information.
And when you say threshold, that means how much you can be exposed to safely?
Or how much is released of a particular substance. So if a particular substance is released, there's an actual threshold level of this much can be released, and once you surpass that level, you must report it to the National Response Center. And a lot of cases, depending on what that actual substance is, it triggers a whole lot of response activity. So if I'm a person reporting it, I have to report it to a whole list of people. And depending on the severity in that incident, it will trigger some regulatory and some response actions as well. So if something, I'll pick a real incident that happened, and I'm not going to name where, but we had an instance where a lot of chemicals were released accidentally into a storm sewer, not knowing that it was a storm sewer, not thinking about it. And so we work with the EPA and others in stormwater management to try to see where that flow goes to, and see if it goes to a catch basin or something else, where we can remediate that before it becomes a bigger threat. So depending on, there's certain substances that are less hazardous, and there's ones that are significantly more hazardous, right? So yeah, depending on what the incident is, triggers a lot of different activities. And the one thing, if we were in person, we do have emergency response guides. If anyone's not familiar with those, they're called ERGs. They're kind of you can pick to, scroll down hydrous ammonia, and it tells you all the requirements. It's like an MSDS sheet sort of, and the activities you have to take, and it's specifically on transporting and holding hazardous chemicals. So every fire department, every person there probably has one sitting in their vehicle. If an incident happens, you're pulling that thing out. We issue out those to the community. it's something that if we were in person, I would have brought a stack of them, but essentially anybody that, like the incident with the rail transportation, when they give us a report of what those things they're transporting throughout Lake County, all of the pages from the emergency response guide are attached to that. So it's an all-in-one report of like, hey, these are the hazardous materials and these are the amounts and these are the actual mitigation strategies if there were to be a release and what you have to do.
Okay, and is there a specific action plan for a bomb train incident? This could happen in many different locations in the county. So is there anything specific to these trains?
Yeah, I mean, we have the chemical emergency response plan, which is the response actions. We have done exercises on train derailments and things like that. Is it whether there's a specific to a bomb train? I think that's a good question that we can ask MABIS and the hazmat team to see if they have a response plan, because really they're going to have a more active role in that response. So yeah, there's definitely standard operating guidelines, but whether they're specific to that threat, I am not 100% sure. At least for us, ours is an all hazard approach in what we do. So the chemical emergency response plan, whether it's a train or whether it's hazardous ammonia release or anything else, the actions are going to be very similar for us in response. I mean, life safety, property preservation, that type of stuff. We try to focus it on that all hazard approach. So really, it's going to be more chemical release or an explosion type incident.
Yeah, because I'm thinking there was a derailment just up the track from where I live in Mundelein, and they reported that it was like plastic pellets. But what I'm wondering is it left to the railroad to determine whether or not they need somebody to come and make sure that there wasn't a spill? Or if there's some sort of a derailment, is there an emergency response to that incident where, they're not left to decide whether or not there needs to be further investigation?
So if there's a trail derailment, there's going to be an immediate emergency response. To answer your question, whether that is the level of response will be on the level of impact, right? A train derailment that has, no passengers, not a significant hazardous material release, and not around a populated area is going to be different than, the opposite, right? So there's always going to be an activity that happens from that derailment, whether EMA gets involved or whether it's local or both. It just depends on the severity, but it's going to trigger a whole variety of actions. And the one thing that I probably should have highlighted in the slide, but it's on the bottom of my slides, is really when you look at emergency response, it's all these different phases. It's prevention, protection, mitigation, response, recovery. And so even some of the recovery efforts and the actions that take place, that's going to come out through your regulatory agency. So, in the event of a hazardous material release, you're going to have Division of Transportation, you're going to have the state, you're going to have the CERC, you're going to have EPA, you're going to have all these entities involved to make sure they're taking proper actions. So they're going to be highly regulated and not self-regulating on that nature, if that makes sense. And for us, I mean, I know I saw the thing here, ours, I see that, asking if our action is, actions are after the damage is done. For EMA, there's a lot of activities in trying to plan and prepare in advance, but our actual response actions are when it's happening. But the thing that I do want to point out is we're just one of the entities involved. I mean, there's hazmat teams, there's state, there's local entities. I think the goal or the opportunity is to build better partnership in that communication, but it's a function of a lot of people working together. And so I think, as we look at how do we identify and communicate and educate on this potential threat, it is key to have not just, one person like myself to get the hazmat approach, to get the state approach, and how these entities kind of work together.
And there was another question. Do we know how well the train crews know what they're doing with the shipping? That'd probably be a better question for, I'd say, like Mark Burrows, who's a former engineer. They don't always know what they're even shipping, let alone how to deal with it in the event of a spill or derailment or explosion. So I have heard him answer that question before. I don't know if you know anything more about that.
I'd be curious on that too, how much they know what's on their trains, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, certain ones, as you know, they have to provide placards and things, but you know, do they know the details of what's inside of those? That I don't know.
And then I see another question. What opportunities and training are there for community involvement on the local levels? I've participated in that. I'm hoping to get a little more involved. There's plenty of opportunity for that from what I saw.
Yeah, so if you're talking just on opportunities to get involved on the local level, not specific to just the topic, email the LCEMA. We do have a volunteer group. You know, we're distributing PPE. We have folks working at our clinic sites. We have a damage assessment exercise coming up. We might be involved with a federal exercise where people can be observers. So if you're interested in EMA activities, definitely let us know. We're always looking for volunteers. If you're looking for hazardous materials training, local fire departments do them a lot. Some of the links that I put on here actually have some pretty good trainings or some semi-decent trainings. And then really through the website, we do a yearly symposium. It's been a little challenging because of the pandemic. It's normally a reoccurring kind of date, time, location at CLC, but we do try to provide a yearly training. And frankly, you know, learning about topics like these and others actually are good trigger points of things we hear from you guys and your passion today. Well, that's a great topic for a future training. So we try to use kind of the voice of the community to drive that. Yeah, so we do local trainings through EMA, and but your local, your municipalities also do that as well, and the LEPC.
Okay, and there's another comment from Gloria, but before we get to that, I just had one question for you about there was legislation that was adopted February 2020 to include school personnel and emergency response plans specific to high hazard flammable trains and the storage and transport of hazardous materials. Is the local emergency planning committees, are they familiar with that? Because it should have gone to the state and then down to the local level. Because as an educator working at a school, I still haven't seen that. Now, it was a resolution, which means it was merely a suggestion. But I'm just wondering if you guys are even familiar with it, or what we might be able to do to get that implemented.
Yeah, very limited familiarity, to be honest with you. That is one of the questions on your laundry list that I didn't have a great answer for, but I did send that to LAPC, because one of the things I was curious myself even is on your local level, as I mentioned, we're a layer above your municipality as well from the county side. So are they are your fire departments and your hazmat teams, are they a little bit more actively involved in that planning effort? We're in support of their actions. I'd like to know that information. I'd like to be more informed and involved, but they may have a piece that I don't know. So we will follow up and try to get more information on that one, or it just hasn't been wellly communicated down the chain to us as locals.
Okay, and then Gloria says, Dan, this is all really good information. What would your suggestions be to our team to make sure communities are prepared for explosive train incidents?
Yeah, I mean and I know I missed the last meeting. I mean, right now it's a lot of fact and information finding and consolidating. Correct? Is that where you guys are kind of at in your process, or how you're trying to move forward?
Yeah, right now it's information gathering and what can we do to prepare ourselves for this. We listened to the horror that the community went through in Lockney Antique when they lost 47 people in a single derailment. And now with the buyout by Canadian National of Kansas City Southern, it sounds like we're going to have even more. And I know I've already got 20 of these trains going past my home a day. So, and I've already had a derailment up this track from me. I've counted at least 6 in our local area, with 2 deaths in Northbrook. So it's not a matter of when this is going to happen or where or if, it's when and where it's going to happen. And what can we do to raise public awareness, to make sure that there is an emergency plan specific to this type of an incident, and uh, and insurance. How do we find out? Are we even covered? You know, they still have a city center that has not been rebuilt.
Okay. So if you're asking me what I would kind of do next, and the how do we make sure the community is prepared? So, for us, like I mentioned, we are kind of, there's a lot of response activities, and we do have a chemical emergency plan. We have dealt with hazmat incidents. But we are, like I mentioned, we are one piece of that. If you're fact finding, it really would be interesting to get the perspective of MABUS and someone from the hazmat team. So what are they seeing from the ground level, and what information did they have? That would be interesting for us to know as well. The CERC would be a good one, and we can reach out if that's something you want to have them come talk. I mean, the state has a definitely a very active role in this, as I mentioned, not just the regulatory side, but also the reporting side. So, a lot of times I'm getting information from the state. So they're going to have a lot of different perspective there as well. And then really IDOT is probably a good one. Someone that's involved with the regulatory side of it. EPA or others could be involved as far as, kind of that what are the impacts, environmental impacts, but those three, the MABUS, the CERC, and the IDOT would be three that I'd be, I think would be good for your information gathering, so you get the whole picture. For public and awareness, I mean, I think you guys are starting to collect that information right now, but how do we make the access to information easily available? So, what's going through our community, what is the impacts of those things in our community, or the potential impacts, so they know what the threats are. If a train's, they could be running through your backyard and you don't know what's in them or what's going on. Your perception might change if you know what the potential impacts are, and but if that information's hard to find, I mean, I think that's maybe a logical first step. For us, I'm getting a version of a report, and I'm getting these hazardous materials report as a government entity, but there's all these right to know acts, and the information is supposed to be publicly available. How do you make it easy to find or easily available? I can definitely tell you that finding a hazardous material lease from the state and from the National Response Center, there is a database for that. But some of the information of like what's running through Lake County from the public, I think it's a little bit harder to find. So, really, it's not just making it easily available, but it is also advocating for that. I mean, one of the things we're going to advocate for after doing this presentation is we are going to reach out to the CERC and say, hey, if this is easily available information, and I couldn't find it very easily, how do we fix that? How do we make that easily available? So that's something that we'll work on right now. As far as the plan goes, we do have different plans that exist. Maybe there's the opportunity to build some specific function out of that plan for kind of the bomb train. It's, a lot of the stuff, it's going to be similar structure and process, but how do we make sure that the plan is specific to that topic? We could look at that, but essentially the response actions are going to be the same, whether it's an explosion from a train or it's an explosion from, AB silicones. We want to make sure those plans are, all encompassing and are kind of making sure they're addressing the specific topic. And then really that training and exercise component. So I think making it, making people aware of what this, what's involved with these, maybe testing the components. So if we get the right partners at the table, we could walk through a scenario and say, how would this look? We call them tabletop exercises, and it's here's a scenario, this happens. Get the right people in the room, get the right agencies in the room, and talk through a bomb train incident and see how would this work? And for those things that we don't know the answers to, well, that's going to go back and improve our plan. So those are some of the things that I would focus on first. Builds, collect the information, consolidate it. We can help advocate, get answers for you, get the right people in the room to learn more. And then really I guess the final one would be, if there's, you collect and consolidate all information, and it's also the lobbying for change. And I think that's part of the, really the one thing for the group, to think about that I would ask, really what's the ideal state for this group, with these bombs, what would be the ideal state, and clear skies to address this issue. And at least, having that kind of, and you already have that, but that direction of where we want to go through it as a coalition.
Nicole, did you have we'll take one more question, and then I think we probably need to wrap this up so we can get to the rest of our agenda before 8:30. I know we went a little longer, but This is stuff that we've been wondering about for I know I've been wondering about it since 2014, and it took me until this year to even know what you guys were. So I'm so thankful for you taking the time and preparing these slides and the links. I mean, I can't wait to dig into this information.
Good. I'm glad it was helpful or somewhat valuable.
Nicole, did you have a question?
Yes. So forgive me if you've already addressed this. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention. But so when the public is educated about the types of materials that are running through the communities, so they have the power, if they know how the risk level, and if they know what's coming through the communities, they have the power to say, no, we don't want this coming through our communities.
Is the question is, could we, if we were better educated, could we, you know, as a community lobby for change? Is that the question?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, but also, you know, if of course, if we know, if we educate ourselves and, you know, let's say, I don't know, a company or something, some entity wants to bring hazardous materials through, you know, the community, and we know the dangers that are involved, we can say no to that entity and they would have to transport it elsewhere, find another way to transport it, right?
No, unfortunately.
You could lobby for it, but I think that's why the group's here today. I mean, I think the challenge is we've had a lot of struggles to do that, and I think there's a lot of power behind these groups. And so, you know, I talked about flooding, and, you know, I don't want to get too much into it, but like, you know, when Wisconsin, you know, said Foxconn could be built, well, that's going to have huge impacts on Lake County. We went and advocated for it, and we didn't get anywhere. But so I think part of it is being informed, and you know, there's always strength in numbers, right? But yeah, that's you know, being very transparent. I don't think I think a lot of these, I see a lot of you shaking your head. These are powerful groups, and there's a lot of, you know, regulatory stuff. I mean, I just hit the wave tops of it. So I think that really, unless I'm wrong, I think that's the point of this coalition, right? Is to try to be better educated, informed of what's in our community, and make smart decisions and make sure we're prepared if something were to happen. But if identifying the risk and being prepared beforehand, instead of what I talked about a lot is the response actions.
Okay. Sorry for the confusion.
No.
So I applaud you all for.
And all of us are extraordinarily frustrated because we can't say we don't want this. But there are things that we can do, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But Dan, thank you so much, and I look forward to meeting you in person very soon.
No, thank you. And Jerry, if you didn't mention it, and for everyone's knowledge, Jerry is one of our EMA volunteers as well. So so maybe there's a good partnership as we move forward anyway, as we move on this topic. So I hope this information was good. I will say I'm not the expert on everything in this, but I hope these links help. But again, you know, we will, any other questions, feel free to email us. We'll consolidate them. We'll try to get you the answers, and just even putting this presentation together, we'll follow up with the CERC, because there's some things, you know, just, you know, some of your questions, Jerry, on the, you know, easy access to information. I think there's some easy wins that we can hopefully advocate for as well. And if we can't, we'll let you know too.
And then we can lobby, and there is power in numbers. So thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. And the last thing I will say, because I did see the comment in here about sharing information, is if we can't get an answer for that, I did put the FOIA link in there. So it's not the ideal state, and that's a challenge in getting the whole public involved, but that's a workaround to get that information.
Yeah, I did notice that, so thank you.
No, so thank you. I really appreciate you having me here. I've learned a little bit just prepping for this and talking to all of you. So I do hope it continues momentum, and we will definitely support it as however we can. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. So yeah, Nicole, I want to just kind of address that a little bit. Some of the things, one of the best things that we can do is stop new construction before it even begins. That's where most of the local wins are. Like the North Shore, there was a plan to put in a third rail, a holding track, and they fought it and they won. And there was no third rail put there, but there's still a concern that it might come back around. So they're trying to stay on top of it. But the federal government has ministerial authority over this, and it's a common carrier. And because it is something that the public needs for, energy is something that the public feels that it needs. And so it's the public benefit that it's transported. The problem is that they're not doing it safely, and they're left to regulate themselves. And they're putting the public at risk as they're doing this. So at the local level, we can at least try to prepare ourselves for an emergency and raise public awareness. And as we do that and build numbers, we can approach the state and federal governments and look for, lobby for legislation that'll help keep us safe. And hopefully, best case scenario, we start, and we're already kind of doing this, is moving to greener technologies so that, at least we can get rid of some of the crude oil. And there's other things that we could do, like not allowing them to park in residential areas. Like I've got the train that'll stay there overnight or for days sometimes, depending on the issue. But yeah, finding out what's going on in our own community, what's going through our own community. And I think right now the big thing is just trying to gain the information, because you could see that it wasn't easy for him, and he's in the field.
Right.
So I kind of skipped the beginning of the agenda because I wanted to let him say his piece and then get out of there. And I was a little flustered also because I was worried that we weren't able to get in, and I wasn't sure what was going on there. But I don't know, do we want to take time for the breakout rooms? Because we really only have about a half an hour left.
And what about the little survey? That's like 2 minutes. Did everybody see the survey in the chat box? I'll post it one more time. Please fill out this quick, and here it is. Could just fill that out, and then we know who, we were able to know who came to the meeting and all.
Okay. Do we want to just maybe throw out one of those breakout questions and kind of go around real quick, and without doing the whole breakout room thing?
Well, there's all right, Dan is leaving us. We'll be down to 9 people. We could do 3 breakout rooms and it'd be quicker, but let's give everybody 2 minutes to fill out the questionnaire.
Okay. Yeah, because there's a lot on that agenda. I don't think, there's no way we're going to get through it all. So we should probably pick out the most important things, like the merger and the public comment. That's a big one. And then planning for an event. Kind of bringing everybody together.
By the way, I'm transferring like the items that we don't use to, there's like a document in the folder with like unused items basically. So I'm just moving them to get them off the agenda.
Thank you. Maylee, you have been phenomenal. That's all I can say. I was going nuts this past month with the end of school, taking office. I don't even know what else. It's just been a ridiculous month for me.
There we go. My little form's filled out. All right, do we want to do that? So the
I'm gonna have to run, but thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you for your questions. It was a great question, and we're all wondering why we can't just say no. So
Yeah.
we would all love to. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Do you want me to still record, Yuri?
I'm sorry?
You want me to keep recording?
No, we don't have to.
Okay.